You've seen the Louvre in Paris.
So you've seen Mona Lisa? Sort of.
You've even seen the Golden Gate. And climbed the Empire State. I'll take the elevator. And you've seen Buckingham Palace. Meghan, Harry, come on.
You love to travel, and you've already used all the travel books, apps, with the same places and best of lists, and used by millions of other people. I'm Kirk Jordan. I love to travel too, and I especially love to find those places that most people don't really know about. So if you love these special adventures, away from the crowds, come along with me, and I'll take you to the other places. Slovenia. One of Europe's most beautiful, historic, and friendly destinations. Yet it's a name which elicits puzzled looks and unconvincing nods of the head from most Americans.
Oh, yeah, Slovenia. Where is that again?
I'd read about an up-and-coming food and wine scene there, and since up-and-coming food and wine are two of my most enjoyable pastimes, I got to do my favorite thing, head out to a brand new place I'd never been. I booked a flight for the capital city, Ljubljana. It turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. By the way, that's Ljubljana, not Ljubljana. J's are pronounced like a long E in the middle of the word, like in the English word. Well, actually, that never happens in English, so just take my word for it. Slovenia is actually a pretty new European country, but first let's get our geography straight. Slovenia, not Slovakia. Slovakia, along with the Czech Republic, was part of the former communist country Czechoslovakia. Slovenia, on the other hand, was part of the former communist country of Yugoslavia. What was the worst car ever made?
I'm loving my Yugo.
Until the breakup of the Soviet Union, and Slovenia declared independence in 1991, followed by Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Macedonia, and Kosovo. TMI? Yeah. All right. Let's get to the good stuff. The Romans had built a military post here as early as the 1st century BC, but Greek mythology tells us that Ljubljana was actually founded by Jason. No, not that Jason. No, not that Jason either. I'm talking Jason and the Argonauts Jason. You know, with the golden fleece, the great Ray Harryhausen animation with the fighting skeletons. Ljubljana has a fantastic city museum. There are no fighting skeletons, but it's a must-see destination for its incredible collection of art and history. And if you're ever on a quiz show and you get the question, what's the location of the oldest wooden wheel ever discovered? Well, now you can answer,
I believe that's Ljubljana, Slovenia, Bob.
The Greeks and Romans weren't the first people in Slovenia, of course. A couple thousand years earlier, people built villages here in Slovenia, living in pile dwellings or houses built up on stilts. It was at one of these sites, just outside Ljubljana, that archaeologists uncovered this beauty. Over 2 feet across, made of hardwood ash and oak, and found along with its original axle, this wheel and its long-lost partner would have supported a small cart pushed along by a human, or maybe even pulled by a horse or ox. Amazingly, this wheel dates from 3200 BC, 5,000 years old. That's older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge. And after a 10-year restoration project, it's back here in the museum in Ljubljana. The oldest wooden wheel ever discovered. That's pretty cool. Now, archaeology is one of my favorite things, but as my granddad used to tell me, Kirk, you can't drink archaeology. But back to Slovenia. I hooked up with Slovenia travel expert Rebecca Primosic.
Is there anything? Yeah. Is everything okay? And that's
She promised to introduce me not only to the history and scenic beauty of her country, but also the genius of Slovenian cuisine. And wow, she wasn't exaggerating. And in Ljubljana, great food means gostilna as, where we're granted an audience with the Pope.
Oh my God.
Svetozar Raspopovic, or just Pope for short, is considered the king of Slovenian cuisine.
What is important?
What is important is fresh, local ingredients, inspired by his boyhood home in the karst region of western Slovenia. We're served his signature dish.
Named is Quattro Grande. The best 4 ingredients. Pasta, the best pasta. Very, very important, handmade. And
Simple
second,
yet profound. Quattro Grande, the 4 greatest ingredients. Handmade pasta, red caviar soaked in cognac, fresh lobster, and shaved on top, botarga de mugine, dried gray mullet roe.
Important touch, Mediterranean olive oil.
The dish perfectly fuses Pope's Italian Mediterranean influence with the local staples of his Slovene heritage.
Man, under.
And as far as the place to be in Ljubljana,
This is my mayor.
well, where else would the mayor bring VIPs when they're visiting the city?
Nice to meet you.
After 3 more spectacular courses, our final pairing is simply glorious.
With 3 fingers.
Shavings of tête de moine, a Swiss cheese whose name means monk's head, mixed with blue cheese and topped with honey and truffles.
This is the time for this wine.
Licking honey from my fingers. Sorry about that, Mom. Served with a dessert wine from Slovenian winemaker Josko Renčel.
Oh my God. I have died and gone to Slovenia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say final pairing?
This is a time for surprise for you. This is a chocolate balls prepared my daughter. Try for chocolate.
The final course is the pièce de résistance.
Crust and go.
A genius mixture of homemade chocolate by Pope's daughter Anna and limbe, some truly exquisite Slovenian gin.
In the heaven,
That's sublime.
American guy. Thank you for your visit.
Thank
For
you
next
so
time.
much, Pope.
Next time.
Okay.
Why not?
Thank you.
My pleasure. Finish.
As beautiful as Ljubljana is, Rebecca has plans to take me out of the city, to some of the true other places. So, after dinner with the Pope,
Bless you, bless you, bless you.
I guess it's only fitting Rebecca and I should head east to Jerusalem. Well, at least Slovenia's Jerusalem, part of the Steyerska wine region. First, we're headed to the city of Maribor, home to a massive, ancient wine cellar actually built right under the town square. It's a spectacular sight.
Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Dripping water, monster barrels that once glowed in candlelight, and spooky corridors that extend out over a mile under the city streets. Maribor is also home to a cool little museum with a grapevine planted in the Middle Ages. At 400 years old, in fact, it's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest vine in the world. And in the old days, apparently, a decent place to hang your laundry.
Hello.
Hello, pozdravljeni.
Hi. I'm Kirk Jordan.
Stare kot sutra.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Inside, I meet museum director Stane Kosuter, who tells me the history of Maribor going back to, you guessed it, the Romans. Romans loved their wine, of course, so there were probably vines planted in Slovenia 2,000 years ago. Maribor's old vine only goes back to the 17th century, but it survived an Ottoman invasion, outbreaks of vine parasites, and a World War II bombing in which the building was damaged, but the vine survived. Through all this, the old vine still produces grapes, and every fall, Maribor celebrates the harvest with a festival and selection of the Slovene wine queen. There's no wine king, apparently, but I did get to sit on the throne. The end of my trip is approaching, but Rebecca is saving the best for last. It's a beautiful, foggy morning when we visit Samo Kuplian, who runs a fabulous winery and tavern here in Jerusalem. Wine has been made by his family on these hillsides since 1836. And in the 1970s, Samo's father, Oshe, was a pioneer, creating the very first privately labeled bottling of wine in the whole country.
In Yugoslavia, private people could not do wine and label it with their own name. Before that, you could only buy wines from cooperatives. So this was the starting point.
The family's winemaking philosophy has always been to make wine with just two ingredients, sun and love. As a young boy, Samo became transfixed by a certain American movie, and even now, his wines are named Chewbacca, Leia, and Skywalker. The Force is definitely with us today. Of course we have to visit the cellar, which was restored from an original arched cellar used on this site for 400 years.
Kirk, this is your key. Open the cellar doors.
The K key. The K-man. I get to use the beautiful K key to open the huge iron gate. I guess the K probably stands for Kuplian, although I like to think Samo had it made up special just for me.
Can I keep this?
No.
Man, I could hang out in a chilly, damp wine cellar all day. Probably best not to overanalyze that, but Samo has some vines to tend, and we have to head down the road for another visit. We meet local winemaker Yuri Svitanic, whose father bought this winery back in 1937, though the huge wooden press and the cellar are over 150 years old. Now, he keeps a combination of ancient concrete barrels and some new stainless steel ones, and we get a tasting of a delicious Chapon Riesling blend. But there's a whole nother level, in more ways than one. The old original cellar with an almost hidden brick wall door.
So like in the castle, the wall opens.
As we walk down the stairs, I see a strange, eerie sight. Dozens of huge webs catching the light, surrounding the decomposing corpses of a whole clutter of long-legged spiders. At first I thought the cellar just needed a good cleaning, but Rebecca explains the spiders give their lives for a good cause. It's kind of a backwards canary in a coal mine thing. For 150 years, the legend is that the perfect temperature and humidity for the wine in this cellar is also deadly for these particular spiders, and the air turns their lifeless bodies a ghostly white. I don't know the science behind all this, but they're left hanging to keep watch over the bottles as they age. That's the way it's always been. Dead white hanging spiders equals perfect white wine. I love it. Sort of like what I imagine Dracula's wine cellar would look like.
Surrounded by dead spiders.
The spiders can rest in peace, knowing their sacrifice has not been in vain. After the tour, there's a special treat. Since Rebecca grew up in this part of Gorišnica, my last experiences in Slovenia turn out to be the most memorable. I mean, what's better than a family picnic? I meet Rebecca's mother, Matea, who's brought the delicious food, her brother Marco, and Uncle Emil and his little boy Vid. When Grandpa and Grandma show up, it's 3 generations, plus one really lucky American, adopted for the day. Music has always been a huge part of the Slovene culture. It's something that has bonded generations together after centuries of a suppressed national identity. Occupied as one part of the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then Yugoslavia. Imagine, not even 30 years ago, just a blip on the world's timeline, finally being able to be called Slovenian in your own free country. And who knows, maybe in 15 years or so, we'll have the first Slovenian-born baseball player in the major leagues. A hazy food, wine, and music coma has enveloped me, and it's only lunchtime. I'm overwhelmed at the warmth and friendship provided without hesitation to a stranger from the other side of the world. As the April afternoon sun drifts lower, everyone gets ready to leave, but luckily the family visit isn't over. Rebecca informs me we're invited to the grandparents, Alois and Vida, for dinner. Well, if I have to. Before dinner, I get a tour of their small family farm near the town of Formin in Gorišnica. I get to meet, well, I'd called him Wilbur after Charlotte's Web, but then I saw it wasn't a him, but a her. And then I found out she wasn't technically a pet, but rather, raised to be invited for dinner, many dinners and breakfasts over the upcoming year. Yeah. Maybe we should talk about the bees.
Well, I'm a king bee, buzzing around your eye.
The family raises bees, lots of bees. And where there's bees, there's honey. Alois shows me the waxy wooden combs where the honey is produced. Then he finds his queen bee, who doesn't work and seems content to be waited on all day, gorging herself on what is called royal jelly and mating all day long with different male drones. There's probably an ex-wife joke in there, but let's move on. Gorišnica is gorgeous country, with picturesque little towns, small farms, and rolling hills covered in vineyards. As the sun sets, we retreat to the family kitchen, joined by various aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews. There's more local wine, of course, delicious food, and in this house, there's always music. Alois and little Vid serenade us on harmonica and recorder. And then Alois brings out an ancient nylon-strung guitar, and we almost get it in tune. I get to hear a Slovene folk song, an innocent-sounding little ditty that I found out only later was about men explaining they were leaving town because their wives constantly croaked at them like frogs. Later, when Rebecca casually mentions to the family that I play guitar too, I'm required to sing for my supper. I wasn't sure what to play. Then I figured there's one singer who everyone in the world knows, even in the other places. For better or worse, Matea captured my performance on her phone. Who knows, maybe I have a new career, touring the world as the Slovenian Elvis. Although, after 2 weeks of amazing food and drink, I'm not sure I could squeeze into my jumpsuit. The next day, sadly, will be my final day in Gorišnica. But luckily, Rebecca has scheduled one more visit before we have to head back to Ljubljana. Close by, right on the border with Croatia, is the tiny village of Kog, and a charming family inn run by 2 generations of the Hlibek family, Milan and Verica, son Milan Jr. and Urška. I'm greeted by Urška, who first shows me the grounds, surrounded by beautiful vines, and decorated with some remarkable local artwork. She sits us down for some tastings, including a sparkling wine called Louis XIV, a fabulous local Riesling, not too sweet like German Riesling, and a beautiful white made with the local Chipon grape. Milan Sr. stops by with bottles of his homemade plum schnapps and cognac. In fact, there's a painting on the wall of him distilling here on the property in the old days.
This is you?
Rebecca translates his story to what was actually moonshining during the communist Yugoslav years. Don't worry, we won't tell the authorities. Urška leads us down to their cellar, to a special tasting room. The old rock walls, now spruced up with cool lighting and stacks of special bottles. As an added attraction, Urška just happens to mention this cellar is haunted.
You have wine ghosts?
Yes.
Apparently, the wine ghost will randomly tap you on the back of the neck while you're tasting. Emil says he has felt the ghost here once, but...
Yeah, sure.
Well, if I stay 3 hours, I will definitely see ghosts.
There's also a legend that the local Chipon grape was named by Napoleon soldiers when they occupied this part of Slovenia in the early 1800s. Now, Napoleon is actually remembered fondly here in Slovenia. There's a monument in Ljubljana to him in what's called French Revolution Square, because when he created the Illyrian province in 1809, he made Ljubljana the capital. Importantly, Napoleon allowed the teaching of the Slovenian language in local schools, which has made him much more fondly remembered than in other occupied countries. Anyway, Urška says that when the French soldiers tasted the local
They were
wine,
saying in French,
and the local farmers adopted this to...
Oh, the wine is Chipon. And this comes from this story.
Elle me fait ah, c'est si bon de pouvoir l'embrasser.
After the history lesson, we finish with what's called an ice wine, made from Chipon grapes not picked, but purposely left to freeze right on the vines.
So this is the ice wine?
As the grapes freeze on the vine, they lose their moisture, and all that remains are the sugars, producing a thick, concentrated result.
Honey.
It's like a dessert.
Urška excuses herself to some other business. We're not the only people in the world, apparently. So as we finish the bottle of ice wine, the cellar has reminded Emil of a Slovenian folk song. Once again, I'm treated to some music. It's beautiful. And when Matea spontaneously joins her brother with the perfect harmony, I'm simply stunned at the magnificent sound echoing in the stone walls of the old cellar.
That is so beautiful. Tell me the story.
Maybe it's the realization that my time with this amazing family is about to come to an end, or maybe it's just the wine. But 2 weeks' worth of emotions is released. Here, at this moment, in an ancient cellar in a little-known country thousands of miles from my home, it's an experience that will be part of my life forever. Beautifully scenic, vibrant, and historic, yes. Filled with overflowing experiences in cuisine, arts, and culture, definitely. But if I take just one thing home from my Slovenia experience, as with any great travel experience, it's the relationships with the people. Rebecca wasn't just a guide. She and her family took me in, showed me their beautiful country, and left me homesick for a place I'd never seen before. Slovenia may be a little hard to find on a map of Europe, but that's a good thing, isn't it? Away from those crowded destinations that more and more just seem to be excuses for a traveler to post a quick photo and move on to the next social media approved spot.
Me, I don't really care for those places. I'm Kirk Jordan, and I'm going to take you to the other places. Voila.
Okay, how's my hair? How's my hair?
So they just changed sides in the middle of the war?
Yeah, the Thriller of London.
The Thriller of London? Shut those bloody birds up!